Zara Delacroix stood outside the iron gates of Kelthaven Castle with 2 copper coins in her pocket and no plan beyond the one scribbled on the classified ad crumpled in her fist. Housekeeping staff wanted, inquire at service entrance. The wind whipped her dark hair across her face as she stared up at the Gothic spires that cut into the twilight sky, a modern fortress hidden behind old stone that somehow existed inside the city limits without most people even noticing it was there, vampire territory. Everyone knew it, everyone whispered about it, and most people had the sense to stay far away. But Zara had been evicted 3 days ago, and desperation had a way of making even the most sensible fears seem negotiable. She pressed the buzzer at the smaller gate to the left, the one marked with a discreet plaque that read, "Service Inquiries." A crackling voice answered almost immediately, bored and nasal. "State your business." "I'm here about the housekeeping position," Zara said, trying to keep her voice steady. "The ad said to inquire here." There was a pause, then a sigh. "That position was filled 2 weeks ago. The ad should have been pulled." Panic flared in her chest.
"Please, I'll do anything. Kitchen work, stables, laundry, groundskeeping. I'm a hard worker, I don't complain, and I need this. Please."
Another pause, longer this time. "Wait there." The intercom went silent. Zara pressed her forehead against the cold iron bars and tried not to cry. This had been her last lead. Everything else in the city required references she didn't have or deposits she couldn't afford. She'd spent the last 2 nights on a bench in the transit station, and winter was coming. Footsteps approached from inside the grounds, crisp and purposeful. A woman appeared, middle-aged and severe in a charcoal dress that marked her as senior staff. She looked Zara up and down with the kind of assessment that missed nothing. "You're human," the woman said flatly. "Yes." "Do you understand what this place is?" "Yes." "I know it's a vampire household. I don't care. I need work." The woman's expression didn't change. "We have no openings. I'm sorry you wasted your time." She turned to leave, and Zara felt something inside her crack open. "Please!" The word came out louder than she intended, raw and desperate. "I'll do anything. I can clean, I can cook, I can organize, I can run errands. I don't need much pay, just enough for a room and meals. I'm good with numbers. I can read 3 languages. I type 90 words a minute. Please, I'm begging you. Just any job at all. I have nowhere else to go." The woman stopped. For a moment, Zara thought she might have broken through, but then another set of footsteps approached, these ones nearly silent despite their swift pace. A man emerged from the shadows of the courtyard, and Zara's breath caught despite herself. He was exactly what every whispered story had promised vampires would be, tall and lean, with paper-white skin that seemed to glow faintly in the dusk, and hair so pale it looked like starlight. His features were sharp and aristocratic, almost too perfect, and his eyes were the deep crimson that marked him as old and powerful. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than she'd earned in her entire life, perfectly tailored, every line of him radiating authority and ancient, unshakable confidence. The severe woman immediately inclined her head. "Your Majesty, I apologize for the disturbance. I was handling it." "Your Majesty." Zara's stomach dropped. This wasn't just any vampire. This was Matthias Cronin, the vampire king of the eastern provinces, the one who held court in this castle and whose word was law for every vampire in 500 miles. His crimson eyes fixed on Zara with an intensity that made her feel pinned in place. He studied her in silence for several seconds, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and smooth, with the faint trace of an accent from somewhere old and lost. "You're desperate." It wasn't a question. Zara lifted her chin anyway. "Yes." "Why here? Why not a human establishment?" "I tried everywhere. No one's hiring without experience or references, and I don't have either. This was my last option." He tilted his head slightly, still watching her. "What happened to your previous employment?" Zara hesitated, then decided there was no point in lying. "I didn't have one. I was in school, studying library science. I worked part-time at a bookstore to pay rent and tuition. The owner died last month and the store closed.
I couldn't make rent. My landlord evicted me and I had to drop out. No family? No one. Something flickered across his perfect features, too quick for her to name. He was silent for another long moment, and Zara realized she was holding her breath. "Lady Castellan," he said, still looking at Zara, "you may go. I'll handle this personally." The severe woman looked startled. "Your Majesty, are you certain? The arrangements for tonight require your attention within the hour." "I'm aware. You're dismissed." The woman hesitated only a second longer, then bowed and retreated back into the courtyard, leaving Zara alone with the Vampire King. The gate was still between them, iron bars that suddenly felt very thin. Matthias stepped closer, stopping just on the other side of the gate. This close, Zara could see that his eyes weren't just red, but had flecks of deeper crimson and gold, like garnets catching firelight. He was beautiful in a way that was fundamentally inhuman, and despite everything, despite the fear curling in her stomach, she couldn't look away. "I have a proposition for you," he said. "It isn't housekeeping, and it isn't kitchen work. It's far more complex, potentially dangerous, and will require you to lie convincingly to some of the oldest and most perceptive beings in existence." Zara blinked. "What?" "In approximately 45 minutes, representatives from the Valerius family will arrive for a formal negotiation. They want a marriage alliance between their youngest daughter and myself. I have no intention of agreeing to such an arrangement, but vampire law requires that I cannot simply refuse without cause. I need a cause." His gaze sharpened. "I need a wife." The words didn't make sense at first. Zara stared at him. "You want to hire me as a wife?" "A fake wife," he clarified. "A human woman I have already secretly married, making any alliance with the Valerius family impossible due to existing vows. The marriage would be purely for show, documented but not binding by vampire law since you're human and not converted. You would live here, play the role in public, and in exchange, you would have a room, meals, a salary, and protection under my name." "This is insane," Zara said faintly. "Yes," he agreed. "But you said you would do anything. I'm offering you something. The question is whether you're desperate enough to take it." She should run. Every instinct she had that was still functioning told her to walk away from this, to find some other solution. Any other solution. But there was no other solution. She'd been searching for weeks, and this was the first real offer she'd received. "How long would I have to do this?" she asked. "Until the Valerius family withdraws their interest. Weeks, possibly months." "What exactly would I have to do?" "Attend court functions at my side, host events when required, be visible enough that the existence of our marriage is unquestionable. In private, you would have your own quarters and your own life." "And if they figure out it's fake?" His expression remained impassive. "Then you would be in significant danger, and I would be dealing with a political catastrophe, which is why you would need to be convincing." Zara looked down at the crumpled job ad still in her hand, the one for a position that didn't exist anymore. Then she looked back up at the Vampire King, at this impossible, beautiful, terrifying man who was offering her a roof and safety in exchange for a lie. "What's the salary?" she asked. The faintest hint of something that might have been approval crossed his features. He named a figure that made her head spin. Monthly. That was more than she'd made in 6 months at the bookstore. "You would start tonight," he added. "Immediately. There's no time to prepare you properly, but Odessa, my chief of staff, will brief you on what you need to know. I'll have a contract drawn up within the hour that protects both of us. You'll sign it as my wife." "I don't understand why you need this," Zara said. "You're the king. Can't you just tell them no?" For the first time, something cold and bitter entered his expression. "Vampire politics are more complex than human ones. The Valerius family has ties to my court that go back centuries. Their daughter, Seraphine, and I were once betrothed before I took the throne. She died in the war that made me king. Her family has never forgiven me for surviving when she didn't, and they've never stopped trying to bind me to them through blood or marriage or debt. This alliance is their latest attempt, and if I refuse without cause, they have grounds to challenge my authority in front of the High Council. So you're using me as a shield," Zara said slowly. "Yes." He didn't bother to soften it. And in exchange, I'm offering you a life that won't end with you freezing on a park bench before the month is out. It's a transaction. We both gain something we need." It was cold and blunt and completely lacking in any kind of sentiment, but Zara found herself appreciating the honesty. At least he wasn't pretending this was anything other than what it was. "If I say yes," she said, "I need your word that you won't hurt me, that I'm safe here." He regarded her for a long moment. "You have it. You would be under my protection. No one in this household would touch you, and no one outside it would dare. That's what it means to be my wife, even a fake one." There was a weight to the words that felt like more than just a promise. It felt like an oath, old and binding in a way she didn't fully understand, but she believed him. Maybe that made her an idiot, but standing there in the cold with darkness coming and nowhere to go, she believed him. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." He stepped back and gestured, and the gate swung open silently. "Come in then, Zara Delacroix. Welcome to Kelthaven Castle." She walked through, her heart hammering, and didn't let herself look back. Odessa turned out to be the severe woman who had answered the gate, and she looked like she wanted to say several sharp things about this entire situation, but was too professional to voice them. She swept Zara through a side entrance and up a servant's staircase at a pace that left no time for taking in her surroundings, talking the entire way. "His Majesty has been ruling this region for 173 years. He is fair but exacting. He does not tolerate incompetence or betrayal, and he has no patience for court games, which is precisely why this situation with the Valerius family has become such a problem. You will address him as Your Majesty or My Lord in public, and you will never contradict him in front of others. In private, you may call him Matthias if he permits it. Do you understand?" "Yes," Zara said, slightly breathless from keeping up. "The Valerius family is old, powerful, and holds a grudge like water holds shape. Lady Seraphine Valerius was the king's first love. She died in the Succession War 30 years ago, fighting on the wrong side. Her family was pardoned and allowed to keep their holdings, but they've been trying to reclaim their position in the court ever since. An alliance through marriage would give them direct access to the throne again." "So why not just let them have it?" Zara asked. "If it keeps the peace." Odessa gave her a sharp look. "Because the youngest Valerius daughter, Isolde, is a viper who has been maneuvering for this match for a decade. She wants power, not partnership. If she were queen, she'd use it to destroy everyone she sees as an enemy, and that list is long. His Majesty knows this, but he also can't simply refuse her family's offer without insulting them. Hence, you." They reached a corridor lined with closed doors, all dark wood and ornate brass fixtures. Odessa stopped at one and pushed it open. "Your quarters. You have 15 minutes to make yourself presentable. There are dresses in the wardrobe, all glamored to fit whoever wears them. Pick something appropriate for a court meeting. Hair up, minimal jewelry. You're his wife, not his ornament, and you need to look like you belong here, not like you're trying too hard." Zara stepped into the room, and her breath caught. It was easily twice the size of her old studio apartment, with a 4-poster bed draped in dark velvet, a sitting area with a fireplace, tall windows that overlooked the inner courtyard, and a door that led to what looked like a private bathroom. Everything was done in shades of deep blue and silver, elegant and comfortable without being ostentatious. "This is mine?" she asked faintly. "For as long as the arrangement lasts," Odessa said. "His Majesty's quarters are in the East Wing. You won't be expected to share a bed, but you will need to be seen together regularly. Breakfast, dinner, any public events. Clear?" "Clear." "Good. 15 minutes. I'll wait in the corridor." Odessa pulled the door shut behind her. Zara stood in the center of the room, her heart still racing. This was real. This was actually happening. She was about to pretend to be married to a vampire king she'd met 10 minutes ago, in front of a family that sounded like they'd happily tear her apart if they suspected the truth. She crossed to the wardrobe and pulled it open. The dresses inside were beautiful, all of them in rich, muted tones, and when she pulled one out, it shimmered faintly and adjusted in her hands, the fabric shifting to what looked like her size. Glamour magic. She'd read about it but never seen it in person. She chose a dress in deep charcoal silk, simple but elegant, with long sleeves and a high neckline that felt appropriately modest. It fit perfectly the moment she pulled it on. She found a bathroom through the side door, just as luxurious as the bedroom, and quickly washed her face and hands. Her reflection looked pale and wide-eyed, but not as much of a disaster as she'd feared. She twisted her hair up into a knot, pinned it in place, and added the only jewelry she owned, a pair of small silver earrings that had been her mother's. She was back in the corridor in 12 minutes. Odessa gave her a quick, assessing look and nodded. "That will do. Follow me." They descended a grand staircase this time into the main body of the castle. The interior was a strange, beautiful mix of Gothic architecture and modern luxury. Stone walls hung with contemporary art, vaulted ceilings lit by elegant chandeliers, furniture that was clearly expensive but understated. Everything felt both ancient and immediate, like the castle existed in several time periods at once. Odessa led her to a set of double doors guarded by two vampires in formal black uniforms. Both had the same white skin and pale hair as Matthias, though their eyes were silver rather than red. They watched Zara with expressions that gave away nothing. "The king is inside with his advisors," Odessa said quietly. "I'll announce you. Let him take the lead in the conversation. Agree with whatever he says. Do not volunteer information unless directly asked. Understood?" Zara nodded, her mouth dry. Odessa pushed open the doors and stepped through. "Your Majesty, your wife has arrived." There was a beat of silence, and then Odessa gestured for Zara to enter. The room beyond was a study, lined with bookshelves and dominated by a large desk of dark wood. Matthias stood behind it, still in the same immaculate black suit, and 3 other vampires were arranged in chairs facing him. All of them turned to look at Zara as she entered. Matthias's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted slightly, a subtle opening that she instinctively moved toward. He extended one hand, and she crossed the room to take it, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. His fingers were cool and strong, and he drew her to his side with an ease that looked entirely natural. "Gentlemen," he said, his tone even, "my wife, Zara Cronin. Zara, my senior advisors, Lord Casimir, Lord Darian, and Lord Theron." The 3 vampires rose and bowed, their faces showing varying degrees of shock. Lord Casimir, who had silver hair and eyes like ice, recovered first. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "this is the first we're hearing of a marriage." "It was a private affair," Matthias said. "Zara is human, and we chose to keep the ceremony quiet rather than making it a spectacle." "When?" Lord Darian asked. He was younger looking than the others, with sharp features and a skeptical expression. 6 weeks ago, Matthias said without hesitation. "We met earlier in the year. I've kept it quiet because I wanted to be certain of the match before making a public announcement. Given the situation with the Valerius family, that announcement is now necessary." Lord Theron, the oldest looking of the 3, leaned back in his chair and studied Zara with eyes the color of tarnished gold. "The Valerius delegation will arrive within the hour. They're coming expecting a negotiation. They'll be informed of the change in circumstances," Matthias said, politely but firmly. "They'll be furious," Casimir said. "That's unavoidable." "They may challenge the validity of the marriage," Darian added, "especially since she's human and there's been no public record." "The marriage is documented," Matthias said. "I had it registered with the High Council this morning. It's binding under my law, which is all that matters." Zara tried to keep her face neutral, but inside she was reeling. He'd registered a fake marriage with the High Council. That had to be some kind of crime. But he said it so calmly, with such absolute confidence, that the advisors simply nodded. Theron's gaze remained on Zara. "You understand what you've married into, girl?" It was the first time anyone had addressed her directly. Zara swallowed and nodded. "Yes, my lord. Vampire politics are not kind to outsiders. You'll be under scrutiny from every corner of this court." "I understand. Do you?" His eyes narrowed. "His Majesty has enemies who would use you against him without hesitation. This is a dangerous position for a human." "Enough," Matthias said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. It wasn't loud, but the command in it was absolute. "Zara is my wife and under my protection, Anyone who threatens her threatens me. That will be made clear." Theron inclined his head. "Of course, Your Majesty." Matthias looked at each of his advisors in turn. "Prepare the formal reception room. I'll receive the Valerius delegation there in 30 minutes. Make certain the household staff is informed of the marriage and that rumors don't spread beyond these walls before I make the announcement myself." The three vampires rose, bowed again, and filed out of the room. Odessa followed them, pulling the doors shut, and then Zara was alone with Matthias. She let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. He released her hand and stepped back, his expression once again unreadable. "You did well," he said. "I didn't do anything." "Exactly. You didn't panic, you didn't contradict me, and you didn't give anything away. That's more than I expected from someone with no preparation." Zara sank into one of the chairs the advisors had vacated, her legs suddenly weak. "This is insane. We're going to get caught. They're going to figure it out. Not if we're careful." He moved to a sidebar and poured 2 glasses of something amber from a crystal decanter. He offered her one. "Drink. It will help." She took it and sipped cautiously. Whiskey, smooth and expensive. It burned warmly down her throat, steadying her slightly. Matthias remained standing, watching her. "The Valerius family will test you," he said. "They'll ask questions, probe for weaknesses, try to find inconsistencies in our story. You'll need to know basic details about our supposed relationship, how we met, when we married, why I chose you." "What do I say?" "We met at a gallery opening 4 months ago. You were working there temporarily, cataloging a private collection. We spoke, I was intrigued, and I pursued you. We kept the relationship quiet because I wanted to be sure before involving you in court life. We married 6 weeks ago in a private ceremony with only a few witnesses. The reason I chose you is because you're intelligent, calm, and uninterested in court politics. You saw me as Matthias, not as the king." He recited it all in a flat, factual tone, like he was reading from a script. Zara supposed he'd spent the last half hour creating exactly that. "What if they ask about things I should know about you?" she said. "Personal things. Then you deflect or tell them it's private. You're my wife, not a biography. You don't owe them our intimacy." He paused. "But for the sake of consistency, I'm 198 years old. I was turned during the Napoleonic Wars. I came to power 30 years ago after the previous king fell in the Succession War. I have no living family. I prefer order to chaos, books to socializing, and I take my coffee black. That should cover the basics." Zara took another sip of whiskey. "You said the Valerius daughter, Seraphine, was your first love." His expression went flat, all the careful neutrality replaced by something cold and closed. "That isn't relevant. It is if they bring her up. If I'm supposed to be your wife, I should know." For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set his glass down with careful precision. "Seraphine and I were betrothed when we were both very young. She was intelligent, fierce, and loyal to the old regime. When the war came, she chose their side. I chose reform. We fought on opposite sides of a conflict that tore this region apart. She died in the final battle. I didn't. That's all there is to it." But it wasn't. Zara could tell. There was something raw underneath the clipped words, a wound that hadn't healed despite 30 years. She wanted to ask more, but the look on his face made it clear the subject was closed. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. He looked at her, something unreadable flickering in his crimson eyes. Then he picked up his glass again. "The Valerius family will be here soon. Stay close to me during the meeting. Let me handle the conversation. Your presence is the message. You don't need to say much." "Okay. And Zara?" He waited until she met his gaze. "Thank you for agreeing to this." It was the first time he'd sounded like anything other than a king giving orders, and it startled her. She nodded, not trusting her voice. 25 minutes later, she stood at Matthias's side in the formal reception room, wearing her borrowed dress and pretending she belonged there. The room was spectacular, all soaring ceilings and dark wood paneling, with a massive fireplace at one end and tall windows that looked out over the city lights. Matthias stood perfectly still beside her, his hand resting lightly on her lower back, a possessive gesture that looked entirely natural. The doors opened and the Valerius family swept in. There were 4 of them. An older man with silver hair and a coldly handsome face, a woman who might have been beautiful if not for the bitterness in her eyes, a younger man who looked like a warrior even in formal clothes, and a girl who couldn't have been more than 20, with pale blonde hair and eyes like green ice. The older man stopped short when he saw Zara. His gaze went to her, then to Matthias, then back to her. "Your Majesty," he said slowly, "we were not informed you would have company for this meeting." "Lord Lucian," Matthias said, his tone perfectly even. "Lady Helena, Marcus, Isolde, thank you for coming. Allow me to introduce my wife, Zara Cronin." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Lady Helena went white, then red. Marcus's hand moved to his side, where Zara suspected he usually wore a weapon. Isolde's expression didn't change at all, which was somehow more frightening than her parents' reactions. "Your wife," Lord Lucian repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "Yes, we married 6 weeks ago. I apologize for not informing you sooner, but given the nature of your visit, I felt it was important to clarify the situation before we proceeded." "Clarify the situation," Helena said, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "You dare after everything you married a human?" "I married the woman I love," Matthias said, and his hand tightened slightly on Zara's back. "Her species is irrelevant." Isolde stepped forward, her green eyes fixed on Zara. How convenient. A sudden marriage right before negotiations that have been planned for months. Tell me, does your wife have a name beyond the one you've given her? A history? A family? "My wife's past is her own," Matthias said, his tone cooling. "And her presence here is not up for debate." "Everything is up for debate," Lucian said. "You cannot simply dismiss an alliance that has been in discussion for years because you've taken a sudden fancy to a human girl. The High Council has been informed and has registered the marriage," Matthias interrupted. "It's done, Lucian. I'm sorry if this disappoints you, but I am not available for the match you're proposing." Marcus finally spoke, his voice low and angry. "This is an insult to my sister's memory." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Matthias's expression went very still, and when he spoke, there was something ancient and dangerous in his voice. "Do not invoke Seraphine's name in my home, Marcus. You have no idea what I've carried since her death." "We know you've tried to forget," Helena spat. "First by taking the throne that should have been hers, and now by replacing her with this nobody." Zara felt Matthias tense beside her, and she knew without being told that he was about to say something that would burn every bridge in this room. Without thinking, she put her hand over his where it rested on her back and squeezed gently. He glanced down at her, surprised, and she met his eyes and shook her head slightly. "Not worth it," her look said. "Don't give them the satisfaction." Something in his expression shifted. He took a breath and looked back at the Valerius family. "This conversation is over. I'm sorry you wasted your time coming here. Odessa will see you out." "You'll regret this," Isolde said softly. She was still staring at Zara, and there was something in her gaze that made Zara's blood run cold. "She's human, fragile, mortal. I wonder how long she'll last in a world like ours." "Is that a threat?" Matthias asked, his voice deadly quiet. "It's an observation," Isolde said. "Humans break so easily." Matthias moved then, faster than Zara could follow, and suddenly he was standing between her and Isolde, his eyes blazing crimson. "Let me make something very clear," he said, and power rolled off him in waves that made the air pressure in the room shift. "Zara is mine. She is under my protection, my name, and my law. If anyone in your family or your service lays a hand on her, speaks against her, or harms her in any way, I will consider it an act of war, and you will lose." Lord Lucian grabbed Isolde's arm and pulled her back. "We understand, Your Majesty. Come, we're leaving." The 4 of them swept out of the room, Helena's fury and Marcus's anger almost tangible in the air they left behind. The doors closed, and the silence that followed felt suffocating. Matthias didn't move for several seconds. Then he turned to Zara, and she saw that his hands were shaking slightly. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though she wasn't sure it was true. "Are you?" He let out a breath and stepped back, running a hand through his pale hair. For the first time, he looked something other than perfectly composed. He looked tired. "That went about as badly as I expected." "They hate you," Zara said quietly. "They hate that I survived when Seraphine didn't. They hate that I chose differently than she did, and that I was proven right. They hate that I have power they can't touch." He walked to the window and stared out at the city. "They've been circling for 30 years, waiting for a way in. Isolde's marriage proposal was their best chance. I've just taken it off the table, and they'll make me pay for that." Zara joined him at the window, hugging herself against a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Isolde meant what she said, about me being fragile. "I know. I'm a target now. You were a target the moment you walked through those gates." He looked at her, his crimson eyes serious. "But I meant what I said too. You're under my protection. No one will touch you. You can't watch me every second. No, but I can make sure you're never alone with anyone I don't trust. And I can make it very clear what the consequences would be for harming you." He paused. "The contract I promised will include provisions for your safety. If at any point you want to leave, you can. I'll make sure you have enough money to start over somewhere far from here." "Why would you do that?" Zara asked. "You need me for this." "I need you alive and willing more than I need you trapped and terrified," he said. "This only works if you stay because you choose to, not because you have no other option." Something in her chest tightened at that. She'd expected him to be cold and ruthless, a king who saw her as nothing more than a useful tool. But standing here in the dim light, with exhaustion and old grief written across his too perfect features, he looked almost human, almost fragile himself. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "Not yet, anyway. We made a deal." His expression softened slightly. "You're braver than you think." "I'm really not. I'm terrified." "Brave doesn't mean unafraid. It means doing the thing that scares you anyway." He straightened, some of the kingly composure returning. "Come. Odessa will have prepared dinner, and you should eat. It's been a long day." He offered her his arm, a courtly gesture that felt strange and old-fashioned and somehow exactly right. Zara took it and let him lead her out of the reception room and toward whatever came next. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of learning and pretending and trying not to think too hard about the fact that her entire life had become an elaborate lie. Matthias was true to his word about the contract. It arrived the next morning, a dense legal document that outlined her salary, her duties, her protections, and her right to leave with compensation at any time. She signed it in his study with Odessa as witness, and then it was official. She was, on paper at least, the wife of the vampire king. The castle staff accepted her presence with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion, but no one questioned her openly. Odessa ran the household with ruthless efficiency and made sure Zara knew where she was expected to be and when. Breakfasts with Matthias in the small dining room, dinners in the formal hall when there were guests, alone in his study when there weren't. Public appearances at court functions twice a week. The rest of her time was her own. It should have felt like a job, and in many ways it was. But Zara found herself noticing things that complicated the transaction. The way Matthias always made sure she was comfortable before starting a conversation. The way he asked about her day, her interests, her opinions, and actually listened to the answers. The way he'd quietly had the castle library open to her, and how she'd found a first edition of her favorite novel waiting on her bedside table with no note, but an understanding that could only have come from him. She was falling for him. She knew it, and it was the worst possible thing she could do. This was fake. He'd hired her to play a role, and when the role was done, so was the arrangement. Letting herself feel anything real was a recipe for heartbreak. But knowing that didn't stop her heart from skipping when he smiled, rare as those smiles were. It didn't stop her from looking forward to their dinners together, to the conversations that ranged from books to history to philosophy.
It didn't stop her from noticing the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, or the way his hand lingered when he helped her with her chair. She was falling, and she had no idea if he felt anything at all beyond satisfaction that his plan was working. The first real test came 2 weeks in, at a formal court gathering. Matthias had warned her it was coming. Once a month, he held an open court where petitions could be heard and grievances addressed. It was a tradition that went back centuries, and attendance was mandatory for all the noble vampire families in the region, including the Valerius family. Zara dressed carefully that evening, choosing a gown of deep midnight blue that made her skin glow and her eyes look darker. Odessa helped her with her hair, pinning it up in an elaborate style that felt appropriately regal, and added a silver necklace set with sapphires that Matthias had sent to her room with a brief note. "Wear this. It was my mother's. It will send a message." The message being, apparently, that she wasn't just a passing fancy. Zara's hands shook slightly as she fastened it around her neck. Matthias met her at the top of the grand staircase, devastatingly handsome in a black suit with subtle silver embroidery. He looked her over, and something warm entered his eyes. "You look beautiful. Thank you." She touched the necklace. "Are you sure about this?" "Completely." He offered his arm. "Stay close to me. Don't let anyone separate us. If someone says something that upsets you, don't respond. Just look at me and I'll handle it. You think they'll try to provoke me? I know they will. You're a human in a vampire court, married to the king. You're a target for anyone who wants to make a point." Zara took a breath and nodded. "Okay, I'm ready." They descended the staircase together, and Zara felt every eye in the entrance hall turn toward them. The gathered vampires, at least 50 of them in formal dress, went silent as Matthias and Zara appeared. Then, as one, they bowed. Matthias didn't pause, just kept walking toward the throne room with Zara at his side, his expression calm and unreadable. She tried to mimic that calm, to look like she belonged here, like she wasn't screaming internally. The throne room was even more intimidating than the reception room: vaulted ceilings, massive columns, and at the far end, a dais with 2 thrones of black wood and silver. Matthias led her to the smaller one and waited until she sat before taking his own seat. The message was clear. She wasn't just attending. She was presiding. The court filed in and arranged themselves in a semicircle facing the thrones. Zara spotted the Valerius family immediately, Lord Lucian and Lady Helena in the front, with Marcus and Isolde slightly behind them. Isolde was staring directly at Zara, her green eyes cold and calculating. Matthias gestured, and Lord Casimir, who was apparently serving as master of ceremonies, stepped forward. "His Majesty King Matthias Cronin and Queen Zara Cronin will now hear petitions. Who comes before the throne?" The first few petitions were straightforward: disputes over territory, requests for financial assistance, updates on regional matters. Matthias handled each one with calm efficiency, asking pointed questions and rendering judgments that seemed fair even to Zara's untrained ears. She sat beside him, trying to look attentive and composed, and slowly felt herself relax into the role. Then Lord Lucian stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying across the hall, "I come seeking clarification on a matter of law." Matthias's expression didn't change. "Speak." "Vampire marriage law is ancient and complex, as you know. It requires witnesses, blood oaths, and registration with the High Council. I understand that you claim to have married a human 6 weeks ago, but I have yet to see evidence that the proper protocols were followed." The hall went very quiet. Matthias leaned back in his throne, his posture relaxed, but Zara could see the tension in his shoulders. "Are you questioning the validity of my marriage, Lucian?" "I'm asking for transparency, Your Majesty. The court has a right to know that their king's marriage is legitimate. My marriage was registered with the High Council the day after it occurred. If you doubt that, you're welcome to file an inquiry with them directly." "And the witnesses?" Lucian pressed. "Vampire law requires 3. They were present. May we know their names?" "No." Matthias's voice went cold. "My wedding was a private affair. I'm not obligated to disclose the guest list to satisfy your curiosity."
It's not curiosity, Your Majesty. It's concern. Your wife is human. The laws regarding human vampire marriages are the same as any other marriage, Matthias interrupted. Zara is my wife in every way that matters. Her species is irrelevant. Isolde spoke up from behind her father, her voice sweet and poisonous. But surely, Your Majesty, you understand our confusion. You've been alone for 30 years. You've refused every match proposed to you, and then suddenly, with no warning, you marry a human girl no one has ever heard of. It seems convenient. Convenient, Matthias repeated, his tone flat. Forgive me, but yes, the timing is suspicious. One might wonder if the marriage is simply a political maneuver. Zara's heart was pounding so hard she felt dizzy. This was it. This was the moment where everything could fall apart. She glanced at Matthias and saw that his jaw was tight, his eyes blazing crimson. Before he could respond, Zara spoke. May I address the court, Your Majesty? Every head turned toward her. Matthias looked surprised, but he nodded. Of course. Zara stood, her legs shaking but her voice steady. She looked directly at Isolde. You're right that the timing seems convenient. But that's because it is. Matthias and I kept our relationship quiet because we wanted to be sure of each other before involving the court. When he learned that your family was pursuing a marriage alliance, he told me what it would mean if we made our marriage public. He gave me a choice: stay hidden and safe, or stand beside him and face the scrutiny of this court. She paused. I chose him, not because of politics, not because of convenience, because I love him. The words came out strong and clear, and as she said them, Zara realized with a jolt that they were true. She did love him. Somewhere in the last 2 weeks, somewhere between quiet dinners and careful conversations, and the way he looked at her like she mattered, she'd fallen completely and hopelessly in love with Matthias Cronin. The hall was silent. Matthias was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read, something raw and vulnerable flickering in his eyes. Isolde's smile turned sharp. Pretty words, but love doesn't make a marriage legitimate. No, Matthias said, standing. His voice rang out across the hall, commanding and absolute. Law makes a marriage legitimate, and mine is legal under every statute that governs this region. If you have doubts, Isolde, file a formal challenge with the High Council, but do it quietly and do it carefully, because if you bring a frivolous accusation against your king, you'll face consequences. He turned to address the entire court. Zara is my wife and your queen. Anyone who questions that questions me. Is that clear? Murmurs of assent rippled through the hall. Lord Lucian's face was tight with fury, but he bowed. Crystal clear, Your Majesty. Good. Matthias looked at Casimir. We're done for the evening. Court is dismissed. The vampires began filing out, but Zara barely noticed. She was still standing beside the throne, her heart racing, her mind spinning with the realization of what she'd just admitted out loud. Not the fake declaration of love for the court, the real one that she felt in every cell of her body. Matthias turned to her once the hall had emptied, leaving only the two of them and a few guards at the doors. That was reckless, he said quietly. I know. You put yourself directly in their sights. I know. Zara. He stopped, his expression conflicted. Why did you do that? Because I love you, she wanted to say. Because I couldn't stand there and let them tear you apart. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being fake for me. But she couldn't say any of that, so instead she lifted her chin and met his eyes. Because you needed someone to fight for you. And that's what wives do. He stared at her for a long moment, something churning in his crimson eyes that looked like it might have been hope. Then he closed his eyes and turned away. Come. We should get out of here. He walked toward the side exit without waiting for her, and Zara followed, her heart cracking in her chest. That night, lying alone in her beautiful borrowed room, Zara let herself cry. Because she'd broken the cardinal rule of any fake relationship. She'd made it real in her heart, and she had no idea if Matthias felt anything for her beyond gratitude and maybe friendship. The next morning, she woke to find a note slipped under her door. Matthias's handwriting, angular and precise.
Library. 10 o'clock. Please. She dressed carefully and made her way to the castle library at the appointed time. It was a massive, beautiful space, 3 stories of books with a spiral staircase and stained glass windows that cast colored light across the floors. Matthias was waiting near the back, standing by a window that overlooked the gardens. He turned when she entered, and Zara's breath caught. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept, and there was something vulnerable in his expression that she'd never seen before. "You said you loved me," he said without preamble. In front of the court. Was that just for show? Zara's heart stopped. She could lie. She should lie. It would be safer, easier, less complicated. But she was so tired of pretending. "No," she said quietly. "It wasn't." He closed his eyes. "Zara, I know this wasn't part of the deal," she said quickly. "I know you hired me to play a role, and I'm sorry if I'm making things complicated. But you asked, and I'm not going to lie to you. I fell in love with you. Somewhere in the last 2 weeks I fell, and I can't take it back." "You can't love me," he said, his voice strained. "You don't know me, not really. What you've seen is the version of me that I show the court. The rest of me is—" He broke off and turned away. "I'm not a good man, Zara. I've done things I regret. I've hurt people. I've been alone for 30 years because I couldn't let myself care about anyone again after Seraphine died. I'm broken." "I don't care," Zara said. She crossed the library to stand beside him, close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands were clenched at his sides. "I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be honest. Do you feel anything for me? Anything at all?" He was quiet for so long that Zara thought he wouldn't answer. Then, finally, he turned to face her. "I feel too much," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to. I tried not to. But you're brave and kind and stubborn, and you see me as something other than a king or a monster. You look at me like I'm just a man, and yes, I feel something for you, something that terrifies me." "Why?" Zara asked. "Because everyone I've loved has died or left or betrayed me. Because caring about you makes you a target for everyone who wants to hurt me. Because this was supposed to be simple and now it's not, and I don't know how to protect you from the consequences of that." Zara reached up and cupped his face in her hands, her heart pounding. "Maybe you don't have to protect me. Maybe we just figure it out together." He stared at her, his crimson eyes searching hers. Then, slowly, he leaned down and kissed her. It was soft and hesitant, nothing like the commanding confidence he showed the rest of the world. It was the kiss of someone who'd been alone too long, who'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone in. Zara kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it, and felt him shudder against her. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, and his eyes were closed. "This changes everything," he said. "I know. The Valerius family will use this against us. They'll see you as leverage. Let them try." Zara pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "I meant what I said. I chose you. I'm not going anywhere." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face and made him look younger, less burdened. "You're incredible. Do you know that?" "I'm really not. I'm just stubborn." "You're both." He brushed a strand of hair back from her face. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," Zara said, and he laughed, a genuine warm sound that made her chest ache. "But you're stuck with me now. I can live with that." They stayed there for a long time, just holding each other in the quiet of the library, and for the first time since this whole thing started, Zara felt like everything might actually be okay. But peace never lasted long in a vampire court. 3 days later, Zara was in the gardens when she felt someone watching her. She looked up to find Isolde Valerius standing at the edge of the path, her green eyes cold and assessing. "Queen Zara," Isolde said, her tone mocking, "how charming to find you out here alone." Zara's stomach dropped. Matthias had warned her never to be alone with anyone from the Valerius family, but she'd thought the gardens were safe. The guards were visible at the gates, and there were staff moving around the grounds, but none of them were close enough to reach her quickly. "Lady Isolde," Zara said, keeping her voice steady, "was there something you needed?"
Just a conversation, woman to woman. Isolde stepped onto the path, moving with the fluid grace that marked her as a predator. I thought we should get to know each other since you've taken the place that should have been mine. I didn't take anything. Matthias chose me. Did he? Isolde tilted her head. Or did you simply appear at a convenient time and he used you to avoid a political obligation? If you have a problem with his choices, take it up with him. Oh, I intend to. But first I thought I should understand what he sees in you. You're pretty enough, I suppose, in a common sort of way. But there's nothing special about you. Nothing that would make a king give up an alliance for a nobody. Zara's hands clenched at her sides. I'm not discussing my marriage with you. Your marriage, Isolde repeated and laughed. You really believe it's real, don't you? You think he loves you. That's between us. Let me tell you something about Matthias Cronin, Isolde said, her voice dropping to something soft and cruel. He loved Seraphine, truly, completely, with everything he had. When she died, it destroyed him. He's been dead inside ever since, and whatever he's told you, whatever he's made you believe, it's a lie. He's using you, and when he doesn't need you anymore, he'll discard you like the trash you are. The words hit like a physical blow, not because Zara believed them, but because they echoed her own fears. You're wrong, she said. Am I? Isolde moved closer. Ask yourself this. Has he turned you? Has he offered to make you immortal, to bind you to him forever? No? Then he doesn't love you. You're temporary, a convenience. And when this is over, you'll go back to whatever gutter he found you in, and he'll finally move on to someone worthy of standing at his side. That's enough. Matthias's voice cut through the garden like a blade. He appeared from the direction of the castle, moving with preternatural speed, and within seconds he was between Zara and Isolde, his eyes blazing. You were told to stay away from her, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Isolde didn't back down. We were just talking. You were threatening my wife. That's not talking, that's a declaration of war. I haven't touched her. No, you've just been poisoning her with lies. He turned to Zara. Are you all right? I'm fine, Zara said, though her hands were shaking. She's just trying to get under my skin. And succeeding, I see. Isolde looked at Matthias with something like pity in her eyes. You can't keep her safe, you know. She's human. Fragile. Even with all your power, you can't watch her every second. Something will happen. An accident. A mistake. And she'll be gone, just like Seraphine. Is that really what you want? To love someone again only to lose them? Matthias's expression went cold. Get out of my home. Take your family and leave this city. If you're still here by sunset, I'll have you arrested for trespassing and threatening the queen. You can't banish us. We have rights. I am the law in this region, Matthias said, and I've just revoked those rights. Leave or be removed by force. Isolde's face twisted with fury, but she must have seen something in his eyes that convinced her he meant it. She stepped back, inclined her head in a mockery of a bow, and swept out of the garden. Matthias watched her go, then turned to Zara. Are you hurt? No, just shaken. Zara tried to smile. She's good at finding weak spots. Everything she said was a lie. Was it? Zara met his eyes. You loved Seraphine. She died. You've been alone since. That's all true. He flinched. Yes, but... And you haven't offered to turn me, to make me immortal. Because I won't trap you into this life without giving you a choice, he said. Not because I don't want it. There's a difference. Zara felt something in her chest ease. You'd want that? Me? Staying? Yes. He took her hands in his grip tight. I know this started as a transaction, but it's not that anymore. Not for me. I want you here, Zara. Not as a fake wife, as my partner, for as long as you'll have me. And if I wanted forever? She asked quietly. His eyes widened. You'd want to be turned? I don't know. Maybe. Someday.
But I'd want it to be my choice, not something forced on me because I'm too fragile to survive your world as I am." "You're not fragile," Matthias said fiercely.
"You're the strongest person I know. You walked into a vampire court with no preparation, no training, and you've held your own against some of the oldest and most dangerous beings in this region. That's not fragility. That's courage." Zara felt tears prick her eyes. "Isolde said, you can't keep me safe. I'll find a way. I won't lose you." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "I promise, Zara, I won't let them hurt you." She buried her face in his chest and let herself believe it. The Valerius family left the city that evening, just before sunset. But Isolde's words haunted Zara in the days that followed. She was human. She was fragile. And no matter how much Matthias cared about her, there would always be people who saw her as a weakness to exploit. A week later, she brought it up over dinner in Matthias's study. They'd fallen into the habit of eating there most nights, away from the formality of the court, and it had become Zara's favorite part of the day. "I've been thinking," she said, pushing her food around her plate, "about what Isolde said, about me being temporary." Matthias set down his fork. "Zara, I'm not saying she was right about everything, but she was right about one thing. I'm human. If we stay together, I'm going to age and you're not. Eventually I'll die, and you'll be alone again. That's just reality. So what are you suggesting?" His voice was carefully neutral. "I want to understand what turning would mean. Not because I'm ready to make that choice now, but because I want to know what I'd be agreeing to if I ever did." He was quiet for a moment, his crimson eyes studying her. Then he nodded. "All right. Ask me anything. Does it hurt?" "Yes. The transformation is painful. It feels like your entire body is being remade from the inside out. It lasts several hours, but once it's done, the pain stops." "And after? What changes?" "Everything. You'll need blood to survive. Sunlight will burn you. You'll be stronger, faster, nearly immortal. You'll stop aging. Your senses will sharpen. You'll be able to do things you never thought possible." "What about who I am? Will I still be me?" "Yes," he said firmly. "Turning doesn't change your personality or your memories. You'll still be you, just more. Do you regret it? Being turned?" He considered that. "Sometimes. I miss sunlight. I miss being able to walk through the world without being seen as a monster. But I've also lived nearly 200 years, seen things and met people I never would have otherwise. It's complicated. If I asked you to turn me, would you do it?" His expression went very serious. "Not until I was certain you understood what you were giving up and that you were choosing it freely, without coercion or pressure. This isn't a decision you can undo, Zara. It's permanent." "I know." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm not asking you to do it now. I just want to know it's an option, that if I decide that's what I want, you'd be willing." "I would," he said quietly. "But I'd also be happy to have you exactly as you are for as long as you'll stay. Human or vampire, it doesn't matter to me. I just want you." The sincerity in his voice made her chest ache. She squeezed his hand. "I want you too. All of you. Even the parts you think are broken." He smiled then, soft and genuine, and pulled her close for a kiss that tasted like promise and hope. For 3 weeks, things were quiet. The Valerius family stayed away. The court seemed to accept Zara's presence, and she and Matthias settled into something that felt almost like a real marriage. They attended functions together, hosted dinners, and spent their evenings talking in the library or his study. He showed her parts of the castle she'd never seen, told her stories from his long life, and listened with genuine interest when she talked about her own experiences and dreams. She was happier than she'd ever been, which, of course, was when everything fell apart. It happened at a regional summit. Vampire leaders from across the eastern provinces had gathered at Kelthaven for 3 days of negotiations and political maneuvering. Matthias had warned Zara it would be intense, but he'd promised she'd be safe as long as she stayed close to him. The first 2 days went smoothly. Zara attended the formal sessions at Matthias's side, played her role as queen with increasing confidence, and even made allies among some of the other leaders' human consorts and advisors. She was starting to think Isolde's threats had been empty. Then, on the third night, someone poisoned her wine. She was in the formal dining hall, seated beside Matthias at the head table, when she took a sip from her glass and immediately tasted something wrong, bitter and metallic, like copper and ash. She set the glass down quickly, but it was too late. Within seconds, her vision started to blur. Her heart raced, and her hands went numb. She tried to speak, to warn Matthias, but her throat had closed up. Matthias turned to her, saw her face, and went white. "Zara!" He grabbed her shoulders as she started to sway. "No, no, no, no!" He caught her as she collapsed, his voice rising to a shout. "Healer! Now!" The hall erupted into chaos. Zara was dimly aware of being lifted, carried, rushed through corridors. Matthias's voice was a constant presence, sharp with command and threaded with panic. "Don't you dare die on me! Zara, stay with me, please!" She tried to respond, but the darkness was pulling her under. The last thing she saw before everything went black was Matthias's face, his crimson eyes wide with fear. She woke slowly, pain radiating through her entire body. For a moment she had no idea where she was, and then it came back in pieces: the wine, the poison, the collapse. She was in a bed, soft and warm, and someone was holding her hand. She turned her head and saw Matthias sitting beside her, his head bowed, his white hair falling forward to hide his face. He looked exhausted, and there were stains on his shirt that might have been blood. "Matthias?" Her voice came out hoarse. His head snapped up, and the relief that flooded his features was so intense it was almost painful to see. "Zara. Thank God." He stood and leaned over her, his hands framing her face. "How do you feel?" "Like I was hit by a truck." "What happened?" "Someone poisoned your wine with bloodroot. It's toxic to humans, usually fatal. We got the antidote into you in time, but it was close." His jaw tightened. "Too close. Who did it?" "I don't know yet. But I will find out." There was something cold and dangerous in his voice that reminded her he was more than just the man she loved. He was a king, and he had power she couldn't fully comprehend. "How long was I out?" 2 days. Zara tried to sit up, and he gently but firmly pushed her back down. "You need to rest." "I'm okay." "You nearly died," he said, his voice shaking. "You stopped breathing twice. Your heart gave out once. If we'd been a minute later with the antidote, I would have lost you. So no, you're not okay. You're staying in that bed until the healer clears you." Zara stared at him and saw the raw fear still lingering in his eyes. This wasn't the composed king. This was someone who just stared death in the face and barely won. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to scare you." He let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "You didn't mean to get poisoned, I know. But Zara, this is exactly what I was afraid of. Someone tried to kill you because of me, because you're close to me. You don't know that's why." "Yes, I do." He pulled back and ran a hand through his hair. "The summit is still ongoing. I've had every guest questioned and every member of the staff investigated. So far, no one's talking. But this was deliberate and it was targeted. Someone wanted you dead." "Isolde," Zara said. "That's my guess, but I can't prove it yet. She and her family left the summit the morning after you collapsed, claiming a family emergency." His expression turned grim. "Convenient timing. So what do we do? You recover. I handle this." "Matthias." "No." He looked at her and there was something final in his voice. "I almost lost you. I'm not taking any more risks. You're staying here under guard until I've dealt with the Valerius family once and for all." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm going to prove they were behind this, and when I do, I'm going to destroy them." There was no mercy in his voice, no room for negotiation. This was the Vampire King, and he'd been pushed too far. Zara reached out and caught his hand. "Don't do anything you'll regret." "I won't regret protecting you." I don't want you to become something you're not because of me. Don't let them turn you into a monster." His expression softened slightly. "Too late. I've always been a monster. I've just been trying to be a better one." "You're not a monster," Zara said. "You're a man who's been hurt and who's trying to do the right thing. That's not the same." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "You see the best in me, even when it's not there. It's there. I promise." He stayed with her for the rest of the day, refusing to leave even when Odessa and the healer insisted he needed rest. Zara dozed on and off, her body still recovering, and every time she woke, he was there. Finally, as evening approached, she felt strong enough to ask the question that had been nagging at her. "Matthias, if I had died, what would you have done?" He was silent for a long time. "Then, I would have burned the world to find who was responsible, and then I would have joined you." The quiet certainty in his voice made her chest tighten. "You can't mean that." "I do. I spent 30 years alone after Seraphine died, and I was barely surviving. I can't do it again, not after knowing what it's like to have someone see me as more than just a king. If I lost you, there'd be nothing left worth living for." "That's not fair," Zara said, her eyes stinging. "You can't put that on me." "I'm not putting anything on you. I'm just being honest. You asked what I would do, and I told you." "Matthias, I know it's selfish. I know it's not what you want to hear, but it's the truth." He met her eyes. "I love you, Zara. I'm in love with you. And I know I shouldn't be, because loving me puts you in danger. But I can't help it. You walked into my life when I'd given up on ever feeling anything real again, and you made me remember what it's like to be something other than alone." Tears were streaming down Zara's face now. "I love you too, so much." He kissed her then, gentle and desperate, and she tasted salt and felt him shaking against her. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly, "about Seraphine." Zara went still. He'd never volunteered to talk about his first love before. "I loved her," he said, "but I was young, and it was a different kind of love. We were betrothed as children, and we grew up together. She was fierce and brilliant, and I admired her. But I don't think I ever really knew her. Not the way I know you. She was part of a life I left behind when I chose to fight for reform. And when she died, I grieved her. But I also grieved the future we might have had, the person I thought I'd be with her. I've spent 30 years carrying that grief, using it as a shield to keep from getting close to anyone again." He pulled back enough to meet Zara's eyes. "But what I feel for you is different. It's not a memory or a might have been. It's real and present and terrifying. You're not a ghost I'm trying to honor. You're the person I want a future with, and that scares me more than anything because I know what it's like to lose someone. But I also know I can't keep hiding behind that fear." "You're not hiding," Zara said softly. "You're here. You're choosing me." "I am," he agreed, "and I need you to understand what that means. If we do this, if we make this real, I'm going to be overprotective and possessive, and probably insufferable, because I can't lose you. I won't survive it." "Then we won't let that happen," Zara said. "We'll figure this out together. But Matthias, you have to let me be part of the solution. You can't just lock me away and handle everything yourself." He looked like he wanted to argue, but finally he nodded. "All right, together." "Together," she agreed. He kissed her again, and this time it felt like a promise. It took 3 more days for Matthias to find the proof he needed. One of the summit servers, a young vampire named Elena, finally broke under questioning and admitted that she'd been paid by Marcus Valerius to add the poison to Zara's wine. She'd done it out of fear for her family, who were under Valerius' protection, but the confession was enough. Matthias moved swiftly. He called an emergency session of the High Council, presented the evidence, and demanded sanctions against the Valerius family. The council, faced with proof of attempted murder of a queen, had no choice but to agree. The Valerius family's holdings were seized, their titles revoked, and they were banished from the eastern provinces. Lord Lucian tried to argue, to deflect blame, but the evidence was damning. Marcus was arrested and imprisoned. Isolde and her parents were escorted to the border with nothing but the clothes on their backs. It was a total, crushing defeat. The family that had haunted Matthias for 30 years was gone, their power broken, their influence destroyed. But Matthias took no satisfaction in it. When he returned to Kelthaven after the council session, he looked exhausted and hollowed out. Zara, who was finally strong enough to be out of bed, met him in his study. She didn't say anything, just wrapped her arms around him and held him. "It's done," he said quietly. "They can't hurt you anymore." "I know. Thank you. I hated doing it. Even knowing what they'd done, destroying them felt like destroying a piece of my past. But it was necessary." "Yes." He pulled back to look at her. "I realized something during the council session. I've been carrying the weight of Seraphine's death for 30 years, letting it define me, letting the Valerius family use it as leverage, but she's gone, and I'm still here, and I have a choice. I can keep living in the past, or I can choose the future, choose you." "You already chose me," Zara said. "No, I chose to protect you. That's not the same." He took her hands in his. "I want to do this properly, not as a transaction or a political move, but as a real commitment. Zara Delacroix, will you marry me? Actually marry me, with witnesses and vows that matter, not because we're pretending, but because we're choosing each other?" Zara's breath caught. "We're already married. That was fake. This is real. I want to stand in front of everyone who matters and tell them I choose you, and I want you to choose me back. If you'll have me." Tears pricked her eyes. "Yes, of course yes." He smiled, and it was the most genuine, unguarded expression she'd ever seen on his face. Then he kissed her, and it felt like coming home. They planned the wedding for a month later, giving Zara time to fully recover and Matthias time to make sure the court understood this wasn't a political move. It was a love match, plain and simple. The ceremony was held at midnight in the castle's chapel, a small Gothic space lit by hundreds of candles. There were no crowds, no elaborate displays, just Matthias's most trusted advisors, a handful of staff who had become friends, and the two of them. Zara wore a dress of ivory silk, simple and elegant, with the sapphire necklace Matthias had given her for the court gathering. Matthias wore black, as always, but he'd added a silver pin that matched her necklace. They stood facing each other in front of the altar, and Lord Casimir, who was serving as officiant, spoke the traditional vows. But when it came time for them to speak, Matthias set aside the script. "I spent a long time thinking I was broken," he said, his voice steady and clear. "That I'd lost my chance at happiness, and the best I could do was survive. And then you walked through my gates, desperate and brave and refusing to give up, and you reminded me that surviving isn't the same as living. You've given me hope again, Zara. You've made me believe that the future can be something other than just enduring the past. I choose you, today and every day after. I love you." Zara's hands were shaking, and there were tears streaming down her face, but she didn't care. "I came here looking for a job," she said, "and I found a life instead. You gave me safety when I had nothing. You gave me purpose when I felt lost. But more than that, you gave me yourself, all the parts you thought were too damaged or too dangerous to share, and I choose all of it. The king and the man, the strength and the vulnerability. I love you, Matthias. I choose you." Casimir smiled, something warm and genuine crossing his usually stern features. "Then by the power vested in me by the High Council and by the laws of this region, I declare you married. Again. Properly this time." Matthias laughed, the sound bright and free, and pulled Zara into a kiss that felt like a beginning. The celebration afterward was small but joyful. They had dinner in the great hall with their guests, and for the first time since Zara had arrived at Kelthaven, the atmosphere felt light. People laughed and told stories, and Matthias kept Zara close to his side, his hand never leaving hers. Later, when the guests had gone and they were alone in the quarters they decided to share, Matthias pulled her close and kissed her again, slow and deep. "I have something for you," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a ring, white gold set with a deep red stone that glowed like captured fire. "It's a bloodstone," he explained. "Rare and powerful. If you wear it, it will protect you from most poisons and make you harder to hurt. I should have given it to you months ago. I'm sorry I didn't." Zara took the ring and slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Thank you. But Matthias, you know a ring isn't going to keep me completely safe, right?" "I know, but it helps." He pulled her close again. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to keep you safe. I know that probably sounds overbearing." "It sounds like you love me," Zara said. "And I love you too. So I'll wear the ring, and you'll relax a little, and we'll figure the rest out as we go." "I can do that," he agreed. They stood there together, holding each other in the quiet of their shared room, and Zara felt a peace settle over her that she'd never expected to find. She'd come to this castle begging for a job, any job, just to survive, and she'd found a home instead, a partner, a love that felt strong enough to last forever. "Matthias," she said after a while. "Yes?" "About turning. I've been thinking about it, and I think I want to do it. Someday. Not right now, but eventually. I want forever with you." He pulled back to look at her, his crimson eyes searching hers. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. I love my life with you, and I don't want it to end in 60 years. I want centuries. I want to see the world change and grow with you. I want everything." His expression was almost reverent. "Then you'll have it. Whenever you're ready, I'll turn you, and we'll have forever. Promise?" "I promise." He kissed her again, and this time it felt like the sealing of a vow older and deeper than any ceremony could create. 5 years passed. Zara spent them learning the intricacies of vampire politics, earning the respect of the court through her intelligence and her refusal to be intimidated, and growing into her role as queen. She and Matthias were partners in every sense of the word, ruling together, making decisions together, facing challenges together. The Valerius family never returned. Rumor had it they'd tried to establish themselves in another region and failed, their reputation too damaged to recover. Zara occasionally wondered what had become of Isolde, but mostly she didn't think about them at all. She was too busy living. On the night of their 5th anniversary, Matthias took her to the roof of the castle. It was a clear, cool evening, and the stars were brilliant overhead. He'd set up a small table with wine and food, and they sat together looking out over the city. "I have a question for you," he said, "and I want you to answer honestly. Always. Are you happy, truly happy?" Zara looked at him, at this beautiful, complex man she'd fallen in love with, and smiled. "More than I ever thought possible." "Why?" "Because you've given up a lot to be with me. Sunlight, a normal life, the chance to grow old the way humans are supposed to." "I haven't given up anything that matters," Zara said. "I chose this. I chose you, and I'd make the same choice again in a heartbeat." He smiled, and it still made her heart skip. "Good, because I want to ask you something else. Are you ready to be turned?" She'd been expecting the question eventually, but the timing still surprised her. "You think it's time?" "I think you've lived as a human in our world long enough to understand what you'd be giving up and what you'd be gaining. And I think you're ready. But it's still your choice. It will always be your choice." Zara thought about it. About the life she'd built here, the court she'd helped shape, the changes she'd made, about the future she wanted with Matthias. And she realized he was right. She was ready. "Yes," she said, "I want this. I want forever with you." The transformation happened 3 days later, in the privacy of their quarters with only Matthias and a healer present. It hurt exactly as much as he'd warned her it would, a burning that felt like her entire body was being remade cell by cell. But Matthias held her through it, whispering reassurances and promises, and when it was finally over and she opened her eyes to a world that was sharper and brighter and more vivid than anything she'd experienced before, the first thing she saw was his face. "How do you feel?" he asked. She took a breath, testing her new body, and felt power humming through her veins. Strong, alive, different. She looked at her hands and saw they were paler than before, the skin luminous. It worked. "You're beautiful," he said. "You were before, but now," he shook his head, "you're radiant." She stood slowly, feeling the strength in her limbs, the grace that came naturally now. Then she crossed to the mirror and stared at her reflection. Her skin was white as snow, her eyes were the deep crimson that marked her as one of Matthias's line, and her dark hair looked almost black in contrast. She looked like she belonged in this world now, like she was part of it, not just passing through. "I'm vampire," she said wonderingly. "You're my wife," Matthias said, coming to stand behind her. "My queen, my partner, and now my equal in every way that matters." She turned to face him, and he pulled her into a kiss that felt different now, deeper and more intense with her heightened senses. When they finally pulled apart, she was smiling. "So what now?" she asked. "Now we have forever," he said. "To build something worth keeping, to make this court and this region into something better, to love each other without the fear of time running out." "I can do that," Zara said. "I know you can. You're incredible." She laughed and pulled him close. "We're incredible. Together." "Together," he agreed. They stood there in their quarters, holding each other as the sun set outside and the night came alive, and Zara felt a contentment so deep it ached. She'd started this journey desperate and alone, begging for any job that would keep her off the streets. And she'd ended up with a life beyond anything she could have imagined. A partner who loved her, a purpose that mattered, a future that stretched out endlessly before them, full of possibility. It wasn't the life she'd planned. It was so much better. Years turned into decades. Zara and Matthias ruled together with a fairness and wisdom that earned them the loyalty of their court and the respect of the other vampire territories. They traveled, seeing parts of the world Zara had only read about, and they returned home to Kelthaven to continue building the life they'd started. They faced challenges, of course. There were always threats, always power struggles, always someone who thought they could exploit a perceived weakness, but they handled each one together, and with every victory, their bond grew stronger. Zara never regretted her choice. Not the decision to walk through those castle gates in desperation, not the agreement to play a role she wasn't prepared for, and not the choice to give up her humanity for forever with the man she loved. 50 years after that first night, Zara found herself standing in the same garden where Isolde had once threatened her. It had been redesigned since then, open to the public twice a month as part of Matthias's ongoing reforms. Children played on the paths while their parents strolled, and the sound of laughter filled the air. Matthias appeared beside her, slipping his hand into hers. "What are you thinking about?" "The beginning," she said. "How scared I was. How sure I was that this was a terrible idea." He smiled. "It was a terrible idea. It worked anyway." "Because we made it work." "Because you were brave enough to take a chance on me," he corrected. "Even when you had no reason to trust me." "I had every reason," Zara said. "You gave me safety when I needed it. You kept your word. And you let me see who you really were, beneath the crown and the power. How could I not fall in love with that?" He pulled her close, and even after 50 years, the gesture still made her heart race. "I love you, Zara Cronin. My wife, my queen, my everything." "I love you too," she said. "Always." They stood there together as the sun set and the garden emptied, two immortal beings who had found in each other something more valuable than power or status or any amount of time. They had found home. And that, Zara thought as Matthias kissed her beneath the rising stars, was worth everything. She'd begged for a job at a castle. The vampire king had hired her as his fake wife instead, and in doing so, he'd given her a real life, a true love, and a forever that she'd treasure for all the centuries to come. It was, she thought with a smile, the best terrible idea either of them had ever had.